I reached a point, both in quarantine and in my life, where I just don't care anymore and cut my own hair. I hope it doesn't look too awful. Howdy y'all, I'm Mickey, and I'm continuing this Pride Month with a Pride Month tag. This tag was put together by Tumblr user whatsnew-lgbtq. I think it's one of those ones that it's got 30 questions for each day of the month and you're supposed to answer each question daily, but I've already got my somewhat daily ABCs of LGBTQ+ and whatnot I'm doing on TikTok. So I decided to just put these together into a normal YouTube answering all of the questions in one video type tag. Apologies if my pets cause any disturbances or whatever that I don't notice. All of them decided they wanted to be in my room as I was filming. But other than that, we should be good, so let's get into it. Question 1. What does pride mean to you? Pride to me is being unashamed of who you are, no matter how other people in the world may feel about that fact, and finding joy and support in a community of people who can relate. 2. How old were you when you figured out your sexuality, gender, or romantic orientation? That depends. I was very aware that I wanted nothing to do with the concept of gender and applying it to myself when I was pretty young, like kindergarten aged, around 6, and I was very probably overly invested in the concept of trans people around that age as well, but I didn't know the word agender until I was 14. So I guess simultaneously 14 and also my entire life there. Orientation-wise, I figured out I wasn't straight around 11, and then came to the conclusion that I'm gay and not pan after quite a bit of questioning at 16. I see your little snoot. Little snoot! 3. What does your gender mean to you? I'm gonna be so real. Gender as a concept makes no sense at all when I try and apply it to myself. It's just not a thing. I'm just vibing here. 4. What does your sexuality/romantic orientation mean to you? I like girls. I'm not straight. I'm definitely ace. I'm just a little gay that doesn't really get gender, but, you know, girls. 5. How old were you when you first came out? Sexuality around 12? Kind of around when I first figured that out. I don't know for sure, definitely 6th grade-ish. Gender, I probably told Dee Dee in August of 2014, but I keep track of that on September 15th, 2014. 6. What's your most memorable coming out story? I've come out to multiple people solely because I have no self-control and cannot restrain myself from making jokes when presented with the opportunity to do so. Some notable examples there include a teacher, my mom, and my grandmother, who I'm not sure heard me make the joke. 7. Who was your first crush? My best friend when I was 14. Yeah, 0 out of 10, would not recommend. Number 8, what was your first experience with Pride? Jacksonville, my hometown, splits Pride into 2 days and 2 separate events. The first time I went to the festival was October 2016, and then the next year I was in the parade and went to the festival. 9. What was your favorite experience with Pride? Once my friends and I were hanging out at the Pride festival, and this older lesbian came up and told us how happy she was that LGBTQ+ kids were able, we had the resources and the support systems to figure out who we were and come out at such a young age, and basically just told us how incredible the changes that have occurred in the community since she was our age happened. And that was Pretty great. Number 10 is write a letter to your former self. I actually have a little table here in front of me, so I'll just, dear past Mickey. Let's get deep with this. I'm just kidding there, by the way. Nah, man. I don't do that whole emotions nonsense. We don't do that here. Write a positivity note to another queer person or blog. I'm gonna write letters to my friends for this prompt because when I was like 10, somebody gave me a gift that was a bunch of note cards with my first initial on them, and I don't understand. Is it normal to send people letters with your initial on them? Whatever, I'm gonna put these gifts to use a decade later. We'll start with Dee Dee. Purple Siren of the Sea. Jack, dear brother. And Chris, dearest brother. I know my letters are not going to be nearly as cool as the one Chris sent us that was literally sealed with a golden wax seal, but you know what? I'm still sending a physical letter, like it's back in the 70s or something. I feel like that's the point where I clarified that I was born in 2000 and I genuinely have no idea when sending letters was the preferred form of communication other than like the 1800s. 12. Have you ever faced discrimination within the LGBTQ plus community? If so, how? Oh, absolutely. I'm trans and transphobic members of the community, like TERFs, certainly don't like that. I'm non-binary and I've run into issues with true scum more than once as a result of that. And, I mean, I'm ace. That's kind of an obvious example there. 13. Have you ever changed labels before? If so, what were they? Labels with gender? Nope. I settled on agender pretty much immediately and have stuck with it since. Sexuality, I've gone through a few labels. Pan, general, sapphic, solid, I don't know, but queer, gay, demi-romantic, gray romantic. That's a constant work in progress. Just girls. 14. What are you most proud about with yourself, aside from your identity? I do like my writing skills. I haven't written consistently in a bit, but I still consider being a writer an important part of who I am, so writing. 15. What was the first time you felt comfortable in your identity? I'm not sure the first time, since I figured a lot of that out a while ago, but I am glad that I've repeatedly found environments and people where I am able to be myself. I'm so grateful that there are people who accept me for who I am and want me to live my life as authentically as possible and consistently address me properly and whatnot. I'm glad that I have that. It certainly makes me feel comfortable, even if it's not the first time. It's still very important to me. 16. What are some positive changes that have happened to you since you accepted your identity? The major one there is coming to terms with my spirituality, my religion, and having to form my own positive relationship with that and figure things out for myself and delve into what I believe rather than following what I had been told prior to that. And I feel like that made it much stronger for me. I had to go on my own journey, my own exploration there, because what I had been told prior to that didn't accept who I was. It kind of forced me onto my own adventure there by myself, and while that really hurt at the time, I do think that it was beneficial for me. 17. What are some positive changes that have happened since you came out? The most obvious answer there is the fact that people address me correctly now and stick neutrally when referring to me. That's pretty rad. I'm also glad that I get to do activist stuff and work in the community and help others out in any way that I can, which would be pretty much impossible to do the way that I do it and still be in the closet. 18. What do relationships mean to you? Relationships are connecting with people and interacting in ways that each of your lives are better for it. 19. What do you hope the LGBTQ+ community can strive for in the future? A real sense of community and less intra-community discourse and fighting and bickering and policing others' identities, and instead being the family that works together that the community is supposed to be. 20. Draw yourself for Pride Month. I drew a pride portrait of myself towards the very beginning of the month, so I'm just going to use that again here. It's me! There I am. 21 is just queers wear masks. Hells yeah, we do. 22. What ways have you stayed connected to the community? I'm not sure if this means in general or particularly during quarantine, but the answer for both is social media, mostly. I interact with people primarily through Tumblr and Instagram. I make my YouTube videos and watch other people's. If it's not talking about quarantine, I also go to real-life Pride events, both big citywide Pride and the events that are put on by the LGBTQ+ group on campus. 23. How did you and your friends meet each other? Dee Dee and I have been friends since we were 7 years old, when we met at school. Jack and I met because my roommate in my dorm thought we were basically the same person and had to meet. McKenna was that roommate. Chris I met because Chris had a trans Peter Pan book, and that was it. Zach we met at a silent disco that was put on at campus. Note for college goers, go to the events on campus. You never know who you might meet. And then I have friends that I like to go to Disney with and do game nights with and whatnot, who I met through work. 24. Talk about the complexity of your labels. I know some people believe that particular aspects of my identity are mutually exclusive or too complicated. I mean, agender and gay. But again, dude, I'm just vibing here. 25. What are some things you love to do? Read, write, draw, daydream. I've taken up journaling and geocaching during quarantine, and I've kind of gotten back into Pokemon Go. Also, overthinking the characterization of minor characters in media. Mwah. My favorite pastime. 26. Who is your favorite queer person in history and why? I really appreciate the people who fought in the Stonewall riots and protested the strict over-policing of queer folks and led us a lot to where we are now. I'm not sure if I have a specific person that I ever think to myself like, ah, yes, them. But I do like the stories from way back in the past of like a family's son moved away from the manor and a few months later their niece moved in, or perhaps the story of Albert Cashier where when the government was like, oh no, that's a woman, and all of his soldier buddies that had fought with him in the Civil War were like, no, that's Albert Cashier. He worked with us. That is the man that served with us in the military and made sure he was buried in his uniform, not a woman's attire, and was buried with the headstone that said Albert Cashier on it. Basically, any examples throughout older history of trans people existing, but also trans allies existing. Those stories are pretty neat. 27. What caused you to start questioning your sexuality and or gender? Gender, as I said, I kind of always knew. I just didn't know there was a word for it until I was a bit older. Sexuality, nothing prompted it. I just started dreaming about growing up and marrying women and went, huh, that's a thing. 28. What ways have you found to express yourself? Being as eccentric and obnoxious as possible, TBH. 29. What is one of the first things you will do when quarantine ends? Well, of course, I'm going to go back to my apartment in Orlando, and I'm gonna beat up Jack. And 30. What are some of your goals for the future? I really just want to make the world a better place in any way that I can. And be very queer. And that's all the questions there were. I just now realized that this entire video, my little hand soap thing here has been visible in the shot. I didn't realize y'all could see that. I was gifted hand soap for Christmas. There it is. Right now, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. Like, a lot. The biggest thing, obviously, at this moment is the Black Lives Matter movement, which has kind of boiled over, I guess is the most accurate way of describing that. It's been simmering and bubbling for a long time, and people have just had enough. Very understandable and valid right now. Not to sound condescending. I'm not trying to sound condescending. I just don't know how to word this here. Let's see. Black lives do matter. Most of the protests are entirely peaceful until police are instigating violence and aggression. I've seen plenty of police pepper spraying peaceful protesters in this city and in so many others. Confederate heroes or whatever shouldn't have statues of themselves everywhere. We know who they are. I don't think anybody's going to forget about the Civil War and slave owners. We don't need to have giant statues of them everywhere. Back to the looting idea, even for examples where it is protesters who have messed up some buildings or taken stuff, multi-million or billion-dollar corporations losing some property, they can replace that. Human lives can't be replaced. Every time, human lives are more valuable than just things. Capitalism's pretty evil and awful anyway, but also ongoing, but not quite related. Trans rights are human rights, and trans people are valuable people, and our existence is not evil or predatory or misogynistic or whatever else TERFs and J.K. Rowling, even though I guess those are the same thing, she's just a specific example, are insisting. For my trans siblings, I love and support all of you, and for my Black and Indigenous trans siblings especially, I stand with you, and I don't have a cap there for that one. Just, we're not even halfway through the month, and June has been very eventful. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a bad thing, though. It's awful what police are doing to protesters, and it's horrible the police brutality that's been present since the police force was formed. The police brutality is awful and unforgivable, but also people are having to acknowledge it now, and change is happening. However slowly, how many baby steps have to be taken in certain places, change is happening. And that's motivation enough to show that this is working, and people should keep fighting. With everything that's happened this month so far, and this year so far, I have no idea what happened to 2020 here. There's no way to predict what's going to happen the rest of this month. We'll just have to wait and see. But for now, this is it. Ciao.